Thanks. So it's a pleasure to be here. So I imagine that the first thing you want me to do is justify my characterization of our current ecosystem as deeply weird. And here's why I say that. All of these players in the system, authors and publishers and readers and the libraries who very often act as intermediaries, we all send signals out into the scholarly communication ecosystem. So authors submit papers to journals, publishers set prices for journals, readers demand subscriptions to journals because, of course, while individual researchers and faculty members subscribe to one or two journals themselves, most of the journals to which they get access in the course of their academic or scholarly scientific work is provided for them by an intermediary, usually the library. And then the libraries subscribe to or cancel journals. Now, all of us send other signals out into the system as well, but I think these are the ones that are of primary importance to the economic ecosystem of scholarly communication. Each of us, when we send these signals out, we get partial and distorted responses back. So the author who publishes in a journal, if I choose a journal to publish in, my choice has certain impacts on other members of the system that I do not experience as an author. At the same time, publishers have to set prices for journals without knowing for sure what the actual value of the journal is, because when it comes to selling access to the content, publishers have no real competitors. The content that they control is unique. So two biology journals may look on the surface as if they're similar and substitutable products, but in fact they aren't. Each one has completely unique content. And so it makes it very difficult for the publisher to know whether or not it's setting the right price for the product that's being sold. Readers demand that their libraries subscribe. So I have faculty members coming to me in my role as a collection development officer in my library saying, we must subscribe to Journal X. And if I say, well, the problem is Journal X costs $20,000, the person demanding the subscription doesn't care because the bill is not going to go to that person. What that person knows is I need access to that journal in order to do my work. And then, of course, as a librarian, I make subscription or cancellation decisions for which that cause no direct impact on me because I'm not the real consumer of the service that's being purchased. So this weirdness has been the case for as long as there has been formal scholarly publication. But what's happened in the last 10 or 15 years is that these distorted signals have started flying around in a system that is increasingly complex. And it's also increasingly fluid. There's a greater rate of change. So some of the complications or the complexities that we are all experiencing as members of these ecosystems include the growing prevalence of funding with strings, right? So it used to be that as an author, you wrote to the grant maker and said, I want to do this research, please give me some money. And the grant maker said, in some cases, sure, here you go, here's the money, good luck with that. And then you would do the research, write it up, and publish it wherever you wanted in whatever way made sense to you. And of course, increasingly now, funders are saying, well, here are some conditions on how you need to publish it and under what conditions. And this applies not just to the actual narrative report of the research, but also to the underlying data itself, which is increasingly we're required to figure out ways to make the data publicly available. This happens at the institutional level increasingly, especially in the UK and in Europe, less so in the United States, where the institution that you work for may say, if you work here as a faculty member, as a researcher, then you must publish your research in particular ways. At the same time as we try to figure out where we should place our articles, we're running into competing versions of impact measurement. So the traditional impact factor continues to hold sway, but it's being increasingly it's increasingly under attack from competing measures, some of which are complementary, some of which would like to actually kick the impact factor out of the marketplace. Whether that's going to happen in the near future is an interesting question, but there's an increasing complexity in the area of trying to figure out the impact of an article. And then, of course, we also have more and more types of journals. We still have the traditional toll access journals that we've always had, but we also have hybrid toll access and open access journals. We have mega journals like PLOS. And increasingly infiltrating our ecosystem are these predatory or scam or deceptive journals that are pretending to offer what traditional journals have offered, but in fact are selling what we in the US would call a pig in a poke, pretending to offer peer review and genuine editorial oversight, but actually not doing it. And then within or around all of this comes a lot of disagreement, though a lot of times this disagreement is sort of whispered rather than shouted. But there is no consensus yet as to what open access actually means. There are people who say that it is only real open access if it complies in every particular with the Berlin Statement. There are people who say that functional CC BY licensing is essential for it to be open access, and others who say it's not. There are people who will tell you that if the article is embargoed for any period of time at all, that's not real OA. So the whole definition of what constitutes open access is complicating the system in which we work. The competition between social networks like ResearchGate and academia.edu, whether intentionally or not, are competing with institutional repositories for access to researchers' attention and articles. That's complicating things. And then the whole question of Creative Commons licensing and copyright. The degree to which authors are going to be willing to give up some of their traditional copyright prerogatives, some of the control that they've traditionally had over their work, is an interesting question, and one that is kind of increasingly fraught and controversial. So if you're an author and you want to make wise choices in this increasingly complex and fluid and weird ecosystem, what are some of the questions that you need to ask yourself? I think the first question, the most important question as an author that you need to ask is, what's my main reason for publishing? Not for writing, but for publishing. And I think that we have tended to assume that people publish in order to be read. And while I think that's true, I think it's also true that for many authors, publishing an article in Nature is not primarily about ensuring that your article will be read by Nature's readers. It is primarily about turning yourself into an author who has had something published in Nature. Because when you turn yourself into that person, there is a greater likelihood that your professional future will be assured, right? So it's not so much publishing to get read as it is publishing to get branded, publishing to get recognized as a particular kind of researcher. And I'm not saying authors don't care about readers, but it matters very much what your primary motivation is as an author. It matters to you as an author when making choices. It matters to us as librarians when we're trying to influence authors. It matters very much that we understand what is primarily motivating them. Another question to ask yourself is, what kind of scholarly communication future do I want? If I submit my work to one type of journal or to one platform or whatever you want to call it, I am casting a vote for a particular type of future. Am I casting a vote for the future that I actually want? When it comes to the future, another question you've got to ask yourself is, who has power over your future? And do those who have power over my future care where I publish? And if they do care where I publish, I probably need to take that into account. So in the United States, if I've taken my money, and this goes to the next question too, what rules define your options? If I'm in the United States and I'm researching under a grant from the National Institutes of Health, there are certain rules that define my publishing options. The same thing is true if you've taken REFKE money in the UK. The same thing is true if you've taken Wellcome Trust money. HEFKE, not REFKE, the REF and HEFKE. If you've taken HEFKE money, we should just combine them and call them REFKE, I think. Another question that you should ask yourself is not just what am I trying to do, but what are the likely unintended consequences of choices that I make? I'm not going to get into the whole question of how hard it is to get people to talk about unintended consequences, but we have to look at not just what we're trying to do, but also what is likely to happen based on the choices that we make. And then how much control, if any, do you care about retaining over your published work? So if I publish an article with Elsevier and I assign my copyright to Elsevier, I have turned over all control of that work to Elsevier. If I publish my work in PLOS and have therefore accepted a CC BY license, then I have turned over control of my work to everybody in the world. Maybe that's what I want, maybe that's what I like, and then that's fine. But one of the things that you have got to ask yourself is, do I care about retaining any kind of control over my work? And if so, how should that guide my choices as an author? Now, I'm not going to go through all of these in any detail, but I wanted to share some of the emerging and existing tools that can help you as an author to make good choices going forward. This is a very, very, very partial list. This selecting a journal tool that I've provided a link to, and of course everybody will have access to my slides, so if you want to click through and see these, you'll be able to. This is actually provided by a library in the US. It's a very comprehensive set of web pages that help guide you through questions that you might want to ask yourself as you're trying to figure out where to place your article. Hands up if you've heard of Jane. I'm not sure how commonly known, okay, so a few people. This is a very, very interesting tool. You go to this website, you plug in the abstract from your article into a search box, and it analyzes the language in your abstract and comes up with a suggested list of journals that might be particularly relevant. Now, I decided to try it out, so I plugged in the abstract for this presentation into Jane, and when I ran the search, one of the journals it suggested was Leprosy Review, which I'm trying not to take personally, but as I poked around a little more, I realized Jane is actually specifically oriented towards the biomedical sciences. So it's of narrow relevance here, but I suspect that there are other tools like that out there, and if not, there should be. Of course, the COPE member list is very important. This is the Committee on Publication Ethics. They run a whitelist of journal publishers that subscribe to certain broadly understood ethical rules. There's a plethora of tools available to help you figure out how to make your work available on an open access basis. The Directory of Open Access Journals, DOAJ, is a whitelist of reputable or putatively reputable open access publishers, whereas Beale, the notorious Beale's list, which many of you will be familiar with, is a blacklist of putatively unreliable open access publishers. You can find all the information you need about Creative Commons licensing at the Creative Commons website. I think we all know about the competitors Share and Chorus, both of which offer services around green OA publishing. For those who want to increase the findability of their articles, there are commercial publishers that offer some pretty good advice on how to do SEO, search engine optimization, for your article, how to make it more likely that your article will get found by search engines. And of course, when we say search engines, we mean Google. These four that I've listed are all quite good. And then, of course, for those of you who have to comply with rules from your funder, the HEFKE policy guide is online. The Wellcome Trust guide is available on their fact page. And the National Institutes of Health for those who are publishing in the US. And that is it. So thanks very much.